Good evening, everyone. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, our beloved Guru Deva, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, friend and guide, Swami Kriyananda. We lovingly bow before you all. Divine Mother, great masters, help us to stay away from all delusion, from any notion that there is negativity or any energy that we cannot transcend. Help us to find courage to overcome all moods and to keep our energy uplifted at all times, knowing that it is only in that state that we can find our way to Thee. Let us never be discouraged, remembering always that that has only to do with ego and delusion. Om, peace. Amen.
Let nothing disturb you, nothing affright you. All things will pass, but God changes not. Patient endurance brings you to victory. Once you have God, you'll want nothing more. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. Let nothing disturb you, nothing affright you. All things will pass, but God changes not. Patient endurance brings you to victory. Once you have God, you'll want nothing more. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. Let nothing disturb you, nothing affright you. All things will pass, but God changes not. Patient endurance brings you to victory. Once you have God, you'll want nothing more. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. Let nothing disturb you, nothing affright you. All things will pass, but God changes not. Patient endurance brings you to victory. Once you have God, you'll want nothing more. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. Let nothing disturb you, nothing affright you. All things will pass, but God changes not. Patient endurance brings you to victory. Once you have God, you'll want nothing more. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. Let nothing disturb you, nothing affright you. All things will pass, but God changes not. Patient endurance brings you to victory. Once you have God, you'll want nothing more. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. Let nothing disturb you, nothing affright you. All things will pass, but God changes not. Patient endurance brings you to victory. Once you have God, you'll want nothing more. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need.
Let's meditate together now for a few minutes. We'll meditate for maybe 5 minutes, perhaps a little more, but not long. So take the opportunity, sit up straight, make sure your shoulders are back, that your heart is open. Bring your energy as much as possible, your awareness, to the point between the eyebrows, and really in a very determined way, call on God to come to you now. By keeping our energy uplifted, our determination, our willingness, and our energy there, God will come. That is how we create magnetism. And magnetism is what draws us closer to God and Guru. Om. Peace. Shanti. Amen. Thank you, Tandava. Tandava is singing to us from his home in the Ananda community. It's quite amazing what we're doing these days. People at various points in the country or the world all coming together. It's quite remarkable. Tonight we're going to talk about discouragement, and we're going to speak about it next week as well. It's interesting. It's different a little bit from what we've done so far. As I was exploring a lot of the literature, the Ananda literature, which means to a large degree Yogananda and Swamiji. Of course, there's many other people who have written and who have added to that now, but still, the whole perspective that they take when they speak about discouragement is different than what I would call more moods. Swamiji, of course, calls emotions until now. But before I actually start with that, I'd like to share a personal story because it's so perfect. You know, like I always tell my patients, I've told my patients for decades, if I'm telling you a story about me, it's because it's really about you. And of course, that's always the way it is. I don't actually need to share these stories here, though I am pretty convinced now that situations come to us in life, at least to me, very clearly because in the sharing of them, in the retelling of them, a lot of people get a lot. So this is my story, but it's important for all of us. As you all know, it's been a rather dramatic past 4 months for me, and I don't really need to go into it. I'm sure most of you at least know most of it. But my son-in-law has been ill. I've had several unusual physical things happen, really unusual, one of which I'll just sidetrack a little humorfully right now. When I was down visiting my son-in-law and his family because I was helping them, just helping them through this whole thing. We knew as soon as he got sick that he would be dying from that disease, which he did. But there's 2 little kids. There was a lot to do. I was there. And I took them over to the beach. In fact, Lakshmi and I did. She was with me. And we took them to the beach. And in an effort to show them how wonderful and safe the ocean was, I went out for a swim. And because they were just putting their little toes in. They're little. And I came back, and they were the way kids are. Do it again, Shanti, do it again. So I went back out, and I got stung by a stingray, which, for those of you who have never been stung by a stingray, which I imagine is most of you, it is really painful. It is no small thing. It's dangerous. They have a dangerous venom, and it's so painful. Anyway, I called my husband to tell him, you won't believe this, I was stung by a stingray. This is after about 5 things had happened already. He said to me, stung by a stingray. He said, you're in Los Angeles. You could call me and tell me something happened in Hollywood or that you saw famous people or things, but stung by a stingray in Los Angeles. And he was being funny, but it was right. It was this weird series of karmas that just unfolded. They were nearly inexplicable. I don't even want to speak about them as past tense because it's still happening in some ways. But for months, I just never even saw it as a bump in the road or as a glitch. I just did what I needed to do with the help of a lot of friends and a lot of great souls, and certainly with God's grace. And I actually wrote a letter last week that said, these have been probably 3 of the greatest months of my life. Of course, I was speaking spiritually, not what was going on in the world. Well, About 3 days ago, I got another toothache. This all started with a dental abscess months ago, first thing that happened. And it was very painful. So Tuesday, I went to see my dentist. He says to me, "You have a horrible abscess. You need a root canal." And I just burst into tears sitting in the dental chair. I mean, he was looking at me. I felt so sorry for him. Here I am, this fairly grown-up woman, and I was sobbing. It just hit me in a moment. My son-in-law had just died. There's a lot going on in the family, and I left there, and I was just in a mood. And when I got home, not thinking about tonight, but just the truth is, I said to myself, "What are you feeling?" First I said, "You're feeling blue," and I was feeling blue. But then I said, "You're feeling discouraged." That was the feeling that came in. And I called both my husband, we have 2 homes, and a friend who I was supposed to see, and I said to both of them, "I just need the next 24 hours alone." What I was really feeling is, I need to feel sorry for myself. I need to have a good cry. Those were all the things that were going through my mind. And about 4 hours into the day and into feeling discouraged, I said to myself, "You know, you are not your moods. This is not who you are. You don't have to feel this." There was this, not a voice, but a draw, an extraordinary draw that was saying to me, "But you deserve it. After all you've been through." What I had been through was an absolutely direct experience of God's love. But look what was happening. Look what the ego does to us, saying to me, "You deserve it. You deserve to feel badly. Of course you're discouraged." I'm sharing it because it's the truth. Fortunately, and I mean this really, we're in the middle of our Raja Yoga class. I had just taught the yamas and niyamas. We were just exploring them by email with the students. And I had been looking at I'm sorry, I get confused even as much as I've taught it about whether it's a yama or niyama, but it doesn't matter. I think it fits into a couple of both. But this whole notion of wishing things were different than how they are. And it was so powerful in that moment. And I realized how the truth of all of what Patanjali has written with that wishing things were different than how they are, how it fits in so perfectly to the wisdom that Swamiji has brought. This is not the first time in this class that I've said this, because Swamiji is speaking truth for every one of these emotions. I mean, deep truth, a truth that we could talk about for a very long time, because, as I keep saying, but it's important, and by the way, there are new people joining us all the time, so it's good to say it. In every one of these emotions lies the kernel of our whole path. It's all right there. So when I was saying to myself, number one, Shanti, you are not your moods. You can let that mood be over there. You do not have to feel what you're feeling. Furthermore, why in the world would you spend any time wishing things were different than how they are? What kind of honesty is that? What kind of showing up for the path? This is what's in front of you. You might have thought that this cascade of wild events was over, but guess what? God has a different plan. And when I say God has a different plan, I mean karmically. There is a great lesson for you to learn if you will look at exactly what is happening. You have a horrible, horrible toothache, and you are going to have a root canal. And you can have it done tomorrow or 3 days from now. You can fret about it, or you can welcome it. You can decide to be discouraged and feel like God's mistreating you or whatever. I never got that far. I don't know what most people think, but sort of, why is this happening to me kind of thing. Or you can say, okay, here's the next opportunity to flex the muscles of the soul, to really flex the muscles of spirit and transcend all of that egoic pull. What did Master called it last week in a reading that I had? I brought it in to do it for Sunday service, but by the time I gave Sunday service, I forgot it was there and I wanted to read it. But he called these parts of us, he said, a crowd of tendencies. Isn't that beautiful? What a turn of a phrase, a crowd of tendencies. And it's so right. And this morning I was recording a Sunday service. It's Friday, of course, but I was recording a Sunday service that will be shown in Seattle on Sunday. And I was talking about the Bhagavad Gita and about the scene of the battlefield and about Bhishma, who represents ego. It's just perfect for this reading. But there were two things about it that are very relevant. They're relevant to our whole lives, but they're relevant to all of these classes and relevant for tonight. The first is that the character in the Gita who represents that part of our consciousness which is blind, King Dhritarashtra, he represents the blind mind. And we're all blind. We're all going through life not seeing a lot of what's right in front of us. And he has a person by his side often who's kind of a trusted narrator to him, whose name is Sanjaya. And he says to Sanjaya what's going on. And Sanjaya says, they both are on the side of the Kauravas, who are that crowd of tendencies. All the things in us that would take us away from God, turn our attention away from God. Sanjaya says, all of the people in our army, he says, they're too numerous to count. Like, we have all of these soldiers. Remember, those are the bad guys. He said, and for the other side, they're very few. Well, that is the truth, because the Kauravas represent every aspect in our astral spine, all of the energy that is wound up in these vrittis swirling around, keeping us from attaining our highest potential. Believe it or not, I'm going to bring this back to discouragement. I can see that it's going to get there. For a moment, I was even wondering, but it's going to go. And it just was absolutely right. They're too numerous to count. So many things in this life that would pull us away from attaining God realization. And the other little story in there is of Bhishma, who represents the ego. And I don't want to spend too much more time. It's not really sidetracked. It's actually very much about discouragement. But I don't want to tell you the whole story. The Mahabharata is very long, so that's not what we're going to do tonight. But Bhishma represents the ego, as I said, and he's been given a boon. This is before the Gita, which is a part of the Mahabharata. And the boon is, you will never die until you decide that you are absolutely ready to die. It's in your power. Nobody's going to be able to kill you until you're ready to let go. That's our egos. There's an image in the Gita of Bhishma laying on a bed of arrows, and he's riddled with arrows. There's so many arrows in him. He's been shot so many times, but he doesn't have to die. He's being tormented by life like we are. But he's not ready to let go until he's finally ready to let go. It's such a, it's so beautifully depicted and written in that image of Bhishma, because that's how we live. The Gita represents every one of us, this battle of light and dark. That's the battle that's going on, and it's going on inside of us. It's not a battle that's happening out there. You cannot attain enlightenment in the material world. You've got to come inside. You have to work with spiritual energy. It's the only way to get where we're all wanting to go. Now, those are all wonderful stories, and they're wonderful stories that we could talk about almost every week, because really the whole of the Bhagavad Gita is the whole of our spiritual paths. And it is completely that battle. And Krishna saying to Arjuna, here's how you win the battle over and over. Here's how you confront this. Here's how you deal with that. Here's what you do in this circumstance. Always, if you're looking for a soul solution. Today, when I said to myself, or yesterday, you are not your mood. You do not want things to be different than how they are. This is perfect what's going on, whether you're able to see it that way or not. Really, by grace, once again, just lifted myself up out of there. It was a 24-hour detour. I mean, it was no small thing. But today, as I worked with that, both in my meditation and in many other ways that I did, certainly preparing for and giving a Sunday service will help you up as well, because you're not going to give a Sunday service from down here or like this. So everything helps. But as I did that, and I could feel myself reclaiming my power, my soul's power, not my personal or egoic power. My ego wasn't going to get me anywhere. But the spiritual side of what was going on, the only thread by which we can pick up any issue in our life, if in fact we want to solve it. Okay, now, one of the interesting things about the way that both Yogananda and Kriyananda talk about discouragement in much of their teaching is that they start again, and they tell us, as if we've never heard it, about the battle that's going on in our spines, in our astral spines. Master, over and over, tells the story of what happens with downward pulling energy and what happens with upward moving energy, and how do we make that happen. And he says many times, even moods or ways that we move, like being kind to people, complimenting somebody, just performing any loving act, being gracious in any way, positive thinking, anything, he says, has a tug on the energy which pulls it up. In other words, I was still going to have that root canal. No matter what, I had to have the root canal. I could kick and scream and yell about the root canal. Nothing was going to happen. But as soon as I said to myself, that's not who you are, and I lifted up my eyes. Really, this is what happened. I sat there and I brought my awareness to the point between my eyebrows. Didn't completely solve it. I had to work on it a little more. There were 2 very long meditations in there. But it starts like that. And Master starts talking about discouragement by saying, that's what you have to remember. And he says things like negativity, depression, Discouragement, he uses the word over and over. They draw your energy down. Then, what happens to us if we allow ourselves to stay there? We are looking at everything in the world from a position of down. It's a totally different feeling than, even as things stay difficult, that sense of, that's not who I am. This is who I am. And looking at things from up here, the same things, the same situations, the same problems in our lives, the same challenges, they change because our perspective changes. You know, I remember one time about a year ago, I was involved in something that was heated with a group of people. And there are many people in this group, like about 15. And there were about 15 opinions, strong opinions. And I looked around and I thought, this is very interesting. If you're in a circle, a 360-degree circle, if you move even a degree, you're seeing things differently. If you move 5 or 10 degrees, or 20, or 80, you're seeing it very differently. But this is so important for us to keep in mind about exerting a conscious force to change not just our mind. In fact, our mind's really hard to change, but to change our energy. When I read this, I was reminded, just a little bit that I shared with you so far, of when Master said, if you're somebody who doesn't smile a lot, he said, stand in front of a mirror. He wasn't joking. People laugh when they hear this. Master was not joking. Stand in front of a mirror several times a day and lift the corners of your mouth up. In other words, bring your lips and your face into a smile. Why would he have said that? It's such a simple thing. Because you try it. I tried it. I've tried it many times. Although I do tend to smile a lot, but still, it changes your energy. So what I'm saying here is that they themselves, Master and Swamiji, go back and talk about the energy in the spine very pointedly about this. And I couldn't figure out exactly why when I was just reading it. Interestingly, that experience that I've gone through these last couple of days helped me see it. Because, of course, it's so silly. Energy's everything. And so we're not working on that crowd of tendencies or that part of ourselves out there that's too numerous to count. That's what Sanjaya said. It's going to take us forever and a day, millions and millions and millions of lifetimes. No, but if everything's down here, let's imagine 1,000 threads, I hope you can see me, down here like on the ground, and you pick them up from a common point and lift, they all come up. They all rise up. And that's what we're trying to do. I didn't read to you, and I'd like to. There's 2 weeks that Swamiji gives to discouragement. As you'll see, I'm not doing these in the particular order that he did, but the first thing he says is, the secret of overcoming discouragement is working to instill courage in others. That's interesting to me. I get why, and I'll probably talk about that more next week. But the secret of overcoming discouragement is working to instill courage in others. And then for the second week, excuse me for just a minute. The second week, he says, the secret of overcoming discouragement is not to brood. Instead, act. Uplift your heart's feelings. Stand upright, he says. Inhale, and with the inhalation, draw courage up from your heart to your forehead. Then exhale and cast out of yourself all mental weakness and negativity. I want to read that again. It's brilliant and it's masterful. So listen again and read it later, because it saves our lives. Brooding about the issue will not save our lives. We will stay discouraged, depressed, anxious, angry, everything we've talked about so far. This will save our lives. The secret of overcoming discouragement is not to brood. Instead, act. Uplift your heart's feelings. Stand upright. Inhale, and with the inhalation, draw courage upward from your heart to your forehead. Then exhale and cast out of yourself all mental weakness and negativity. That is very powerful. That says to us, and I told you my story because I am here to say this was true. I had not read this a few days ago when this was happening. I had not read that secret. But what I found is that when I said, wait a minute, you're not that mood. This is not the attitude that you're going to have. You just say that. Even if part of you, as I was honest and told you, part of me was saying, you deserve it. You deserve to be discouraged. You deserve to be down. Look at what you've gone through for 4 months. Where was that going to get me? You see, but the minute I said no, and I said no here and yes here, and stood up and breathed deeply and drew energy up and then cast out all negativity, everything changes. Now, granted, that was a little root canal, not a big deal, but not a small deal after these 4 months either. You know, it's additive. There's probably many people in the world who would have said to me, oh, sweetie, come here, let me hold you. You do deserve to be upset. I know a lot of people who would have done that. I avoided them like the plague. I want to read you something else. Master says, actually, this is a quote. This is in something Swamiji wrote, but I know that they're Master's words as well. This is from How to Awaken to Your True Potential. In the first chapter, he says, come out of your closed chamber of limitation. Breathe in the fresh air. Actually, this does sound like Master. This must be Master. I just got confused. I thought How to Awaken Your True Potential was Swamiji's book. Maybe he's quoting Master here. Come out of your closed chamber of limitations. Breathe in the fresh air of vital thoughts. This is our instruction for when we're feeling discouraged. Breathe in the fresh air of vital thoughts. Exhale poisonous thoughts of discouragement, discontentment, or hopelessness. Never suggest to your mind human limitations of sickness, old age, or death, but constantly remind yourself, I am the infinite, which has become the body. Isn't that amazing? I mean, in 2 sentences, Master tells us precisely how to move on energetically, how to leave behind this mood. Exhale poisonous thoughts of discouragement and discontentment. He says, never let your mind be filled with human limitations of sickness, old age, or death. You know, it really strikes me right now because, you see, I am around a lot of people who are getting old. And if people are not on a spiritual path, if we don't understand the amazing difference between the soul and the body that carries it for a very brief little moment in the life of a soul, we get very discouraged as we get older. It's pretty remarkable what starts happening. Your body changes, your skin starts sagging, your hair turns color, you get all these spots, and your grandchildren are saying to you, why do you have all those spots, and why are your teeth so yellow? And I mean, you know, kids, they just tell it like it is. You start getting illnesses, your joints hurt more. It's just true. I mean, it's part of what happens with aging. If, or for many of us at least, if you're going to get into that, you can be very discouraged. Master's saying, don't go there. Do not go there. So I'm going to stop in just a few minutes for tonight because I'd love to have time. We'll see if there's any questions. If you have any questions or thoughts, send them now in the chat section of the Zoom link. And Saiganesh will read them to me. If you don't, I'll keep talking for a little bit. But what I want to say about discouragement, I want to just bring it back into the whole point of tonight. It's about us taking charge of ourselves energetically. It's different than when I was talking about, I know there are people who are seriously depressed, and I know there are people who have true anxiety disorders, and I was very respectful about all of that. Discouragement is really something different. It is something that we can have much greater control over, but we need to make a very strong and conscious choice to do it. Swamiji says determination, willpower or willingness, and energy are the three most important aspects or spiritual qualities that are helping us move along on our spiritual path. Those three things. And I would say that we need all of that right now. Determination, willingness, energy to combat these moments of feeling discouraged. They don't take us anywhere. You watch whenever we're feeling them, and it's a dangerous, steep, slippery slope. And particularly if any of the moods that we've talked about before have come, because you start feeling very discouraged, and depression is not far behind. Anxiety is not far behind. And they compound each other. And it gets harder and harder to pull ourselves up. But if we get it at the first thought, as soon as we hear ourselves whining, I've often thought that we should have one of those signs where there's just somebody like this, just whining. You can tell by their face that they're whining. You know those signs, and put a slash through them in a circle. No whining. And we should put them up all over the place, because whining is never good for a spiritual aspirant. It doesn't take us anywhere. So try and get a hold of it. Stop yourself as soon as you can, and consciously, thoughtfully, draw your energy up. Inhale vital thoughts, fresh, vital thoughts, as Master says. Exhale poisonous energy of discouragement and discontentment. Just hold those words. And you all have this little book, so read it and look at the words. They're right there. Beautiful suggestion. So I think I'm going to stop right there for tonight, because that feels complete to me. So are there any questions, Saiganesh, or comments? If there's not, well, I'm happy to stop 10 minutes early. I always have trouble hearing you. Did you say not yet? Not yet. Okay. If anybody has any questions, write it now. Otherwise, we'll just...
You can also open the mic and speak.
They can open the mic and speak. Yeah, that's right. You don't even have to find the chat box. That's right. Just unmute yourself if you want to make a comment or ask a question. and Sai Ganesh or Lakshmi will convey it to me. I'll just give us a few moments here. Even those of you who don't have your video on, many of you, you can still unmute yourself and speak if you care to. No?
Can we still give you a big hug?
I'm sorry, can we what?
Even though you avoided the people with who would just grab you and give you a big hug, can we still send you a big energetic hug?
I can't hear.
She's saying you've avoided the people who were going to give you a hug and coddle you, but she wants to send you a big energetic hug.
I love hugs. Whoever said that, I can't see who you are. I'm sorry, I'm far enough away from the screen with a lot of you. But whoever said it, and to all of you, please don't misunderstand. I was called for many, many, many years the hugging ma. I love hugs, but I like hugs for the right reason. I like it when people are sending me love and good and uplifting energy, and not when they're feeling sorry for me. So I wasn't clear about that, and that's an adorable statement. So yes, everybody, send me a hug. How wonderful. I'm seeing some hugs come. Yeah, a lot of hugs. So, anybody have any other comments? Okay, then we'll end the evening, and I'll see you in 2 weeks for part 2. Have a blessed 2 weeks.